Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Max Rounds 30 podcast, where there is no overtime. I am, as usual, joined by Koi from MTU Esports, Jeff from Dust2 US, and I am Jacob, and I am from the University of Wisconsin Whitewater Esports program. So in 30 minutes, we will be covering all of this week's NA ESEA Premier content, as well as all of the various goings on in the NA Tier 2, Tier 1 scenes. So let's get things started out. We have a pretty good, we got a pretty good flurry of roster news coming
in classic NA tradition, no teams decide to make systemic changes to their roster until a week before the roster lock hits, and then they decide changes need to happen.
Roster lock will tend to do that. Koi, you said you look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, it's a lot of changes. It's not like unexpected, but like definitely more than I would have hoped for.
Yeah, so to kind of get things started off, we've got Ocean retiring and going to Valorant to coach for the Pittsburgh Knights. So I'm a bit new to the CS scene, so I'll let some of the old timers here kind of take this one on.
Well, if you're asking what value Ocean provided to World Counter-Strike in 2021, the answer was not a lot. He was mainly just there as a living meme and as just someone who's known for being around. But the reason people are sad about him leaving is because of the value he provided, 5-6 years ago when he helped bring up a lot of the young people in the scene. And so there's I'm happy considering he hasn't had a proper esports paycheck in years upon years now, but it is kind of tragic that we lose sort of one of the last vestiges of the old CS:GO world to Valorant.
In my eyes, it's very similar. Of it really kind of symbolizes the retirement of the old guard in a way.
Yeah.
Of the former CS scene.
You could probably say it's the collapse of the Soviet Union, right at an end of history moment where it's you have people like Cutler, Ocean, Semphis isn't, Semphis is finishing the season, but he's not really in the scene anymore. You have these old, you have all these old timers who were at least at their worst floating around the scene on ineffectual teams like Envy, where we're at the new generation now. We're the oldest, the oldest veteran talent in NA. 24 years old. We don't have any old pedigree players that you saw playing 5 or 6 years ago. So it's we're in a new history of NACS. The old history is done. We have to cut it off.
So I guess then, what does this really mean for SKDC? Do you think that they're going to be in a worse position, or do you think it's kind of indifference?
Indifference. I mean, Ocean wasn't the powerhouse of this roster, and Semphis joining is a pretty horizontal change. And like we said last week, there's not really a whole lot they can do to write their course this season. So I don't really think it. If we're talking about the real life impact in the Premier division, not much.
Yeah, I don't see it really changing anything this season. Ultimately, in the grand scheme of things.
No.
All right. Well, now that we've kind of touched on that, we'll kind of get into some more changes that may actually be kind of substantial for the teams in question. So we did get Wrath to Secret Club, which is actually a pretty interesting change in my opinion. I mean, considering everything that's been going on with that roster and, kind of Wolfie clearing his name and everything that's been going on there with just it kind of seems like they were in a little bit of a mess for a bit there. But now that they've actually kind of fallen into what kind of seems like a firepower upgrade.
Yeah, so I actually have a lot of thoughts on this. It feels as though if you look at it, in terms of the one for one, what happened roster wise. So they brought in Finn as their new coach. They brought in Wrath and they brought in Slight. And in my eyes, if they can get drilled on how the team's gonna work, which shouldn't be too hard, seeing as though Finn has a little bit of background with the team. Slight obviously has a background with the team from beginning of the season. It almost seems like an actual just straight up firepower upgrade for that team. And while it's really close to the end of the season, and so it'll be interesting to see how that kind of like plays into like playoffs and postseason and stuff like that. Like there's a chance for them to really step up to potentially another level.
It's definitely a firepower upgrade, but just to take the other side of the argument, the whole like express written purpose of bringing in Frosty K and Wolfie was to bring more experienced voices to the team. And now we're bringing, we got rid of Clasia, but we bring back Slight. So like that's a net even experience trade basically, or you could say Slight's even less experience. And then you bring in Finn, who's never coached at above, or who's never played or coached above main. So obviously less experience than. And so, I mean, this team has insane firepower. It's just even more weight rests on Wolfie's shoulders to mold the roster now, because like he is like the gravitational center of this roster, and if he can't make it come together, like it'll just explode.
I think Wrath actually brings another level of like just individual depth and firepower that Frosty K couldn't necessarly provide though.
It's
so
weird
like
to
he
think
is experienced.
It's weird to think like sometimes I feel like I forget that like Wrath was playing pro league like 3 or 4 years ago. So I mean he's been in the scene longer than any of these guys, and I think it's just like the rogue days are long gone. So I think sometimes we forget, but like he's an incredibly experienced player. But we also do know that he's an incredibly temperamental player, and that's why he never made it on any team above Rogue. Is that he's just like his issue's always been temperament, not his physical skill. So I feel like that's like another challenge. But I mean, he is more experienced than Frosty K. I just don't know like to mold this team into a cohesive unit. It's gonna be a challenge, but it's definitely a worthwhile challenge because like you said, this team has insane firepower.
Honestly, it's just gonna be really interesting, especially considering like the bloodbath that is Group B in Premier right now. Like it is, I think this gives them a shot to really challenge Recon 5 and maybe even Triumph at this point. So like I think that playoff picture is going to be really interesting how that shapes.
There's going to be a lot of
next 2 weeks,
tears shed when the season comes to an end, because there's no way you get every team you want in playoffs from Group B. There's 4 slots, and some teams that we consider to be worthy are going to miss out based on a single series, probably.
Yeah. So, kind of taking on that. Speaking of firepower upgrades, I could personally consider it one so far. We did get Cynic to Triumph in place of Sixy. So, based on like just initial expectations and initial impressions, like honestly I think it was a great move for Triumph, and considering like the way that Cynic was playing on Recon 5, it's almost like he's exceeding expectations at the current moment.
Cynic is the truth. Like he is the gospel truth of NACS. like fucking Sheikh Zula and Tacitus, they can't keep getting away with it. They just can't keep getting away with it. Like every time they get a player stolen from them, like they get Junior stolen from them, they get Grim stolen. Asuna retires. You have like all these players moving on in their careers, and you're like, well, they just can't find another diamond in the rough. And god damn it, they did it again. Like, I mean, if you didn't notice Cynic before the season, like you need to wake the fuck up. But like, I legitimately think Cynic is like, I hope and I believe, I think he's one for the future. And like, this is a revelatory move that he was able to escape from random Orgulous mixed teams. I have high expectations. Like this roster, I think is like, I think Triumph's going places. Like I don't think they're gonna lose funny matches of Secret Club anymore.
On one hand, I want to join the Cynic hype train like a lot, right? Because like these first few matches with Triumph were fantastic. They completely blew all expectations out of the water. But like in the long run, it'll be really interesting to see like once the team gets used to playing together and like understanding all their set protocols and stuff like that, like how the team's actually going to shape up, because it could just be sort of like a honeymoon period of sorts going on.
I mean,
I'm still cautious. I'm definitely optimistic for sure, but I just want to be like cautious. Like it's not like Triumph is going to turn into a tier 1 team overnight. Like it's going to take a little bit of work for them to get consistent results still.
Do you think though, So do we think this is an upgrade, 60 from Cynic?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that because Cynic is just a lot more like consistent, like mentally and performance wise than 60 is. 60
we
seems like it
think-
kind of made or break the team.
Do we think Triumph need another change before they hit primetime again? What do we? So we don't. I don't think we've really talked about B Wills and Viz. What do we think about how they've been doing on this team so far?
I think that based off of previous expectations of the team, like on paper, I expected a little bit more out of them. I understand they're kind of playing a little bit more of like a supportive kind of role in the team. Like they're not the ones like going for plays and stuff like that. So it's kind of expected that they're a little bit lower on the scoreboard. So I think now that they have a consistent star player in the form of Cynic to work
And
around,
Cooper. We can't forget Cooper exists.
Cooper.
Yeah.
And Cooper,
Eggman.
that it'll be a lot more balanced now in terms of performance across the board.
So good move all around.
I think it's a good move all around.
Yeah, I think that's like the kind of what they were looking for is like they had like some of that firepower that they really needed. And they had it, right? But they didn't have they didn't have that one stone, that person who is always playing like, because like it's almost like you're fitting within these like time windows of like consistency. And I think by adding Cynic, they've like essentially added a player that has an extended consistency time window, so they almost have like an overlap for like error and stuff like that. Like it's a weird way to look at it, but I just think that overall it'll just make them as a team more consistently good. So kind of looking at the flip side of that whole equation though, we look at Recon 5. They're losing Cynic, a fantastic player.
Well, no, they're losing Recon 5. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I know what I'm talking about, Jeff. Jeez. But no, we lose Cynic off of Recon 5. And they pick up Infinite on trial, and then or not on trial, but as a stand-in, and then they immediately lose.
He has to
Infinite.
Immediately step down because post-surgery
shoulder.
complications.
Yeah,
his doctor says you probably shouldn't be dragging your arm against a mouse mat for 16 hours a day. And so they bring in Saturn. Yeah, so they bring up Saturn from Rise.
So
any thoughts on Saturn?
Yeah.
I know, Koi, you're a Saturn fanboy. Like, tell us the word. Like, if I think Cynic's the gospel truth, like, tell us.
So I definitely think that Saturn joining Recon 5, like, in all fairness, it is a little bit of a downgrade. Like, Saturn is not going to be able to put up the high consistent numbers that you saw, Cynic put up, and that Infinite would have put up in the long run. But he's still like a solid rock of a player. Like, he's not going to underperform. Like, he's going to know how to play his role. He's going to play it well. And so if someone else on the Recon 5 core can kind of like step up to kind of fill that role, I think that they'll be fine.
Who do you think there's anyone who can do that on that team?
I personally think that between Cobra and Twice, I don't think they're going to be suffering too much.
The issue with them is that it'll take, like, based off their most recent performances and stuff, like, none of them are really, like, taking over the game per se. Like, they're not single-handedly winning rounds consistently. They can't just, like, pop off and get a 4K, like, whenever they need to kind of thing, right? Like, they're good. And if they're able to, like, do that, then I think they'll be fine. Because, like, that's what Infinite had. That's what Sneaky had, right? And I'm sure if they work something out in terms of like their performance and stuff like that, they could get to that point perfectly fine. So I would just be a little bit more hesitant about expecting the same level of results, but they're definitely going to be a formidable team regardless.
Yeah, I'm not out on Recon 5. This is definitely a downgrade for them, but like if you had to pick up a player right before roster lock, like Saturn's probably the player you would pick up right there. And then the final part of the equation we have is 60 immediately rebounds and joins Rebirth, replacing Wrath. Thoughts, feelings?
I mean, the revenge
is it a blah move? Like,
I mean, the revenge was sweet for like a day, and then they immediately lost again. So it wasn't really a long lasting revenge that 60 got out of that equation. But like, I don't know how to feel about that, honestly. I don't know if I have a lot of insight on that. It's such a lateral move almost.
And like Rebirth is such like a messy team. Like I feel completely vindicated because I said in the preseason that this is going to be a team that's just going to be a revolving door. and lo and behold, it's been a revolving door. Like, so I don't know if it like the core of this team is like fine, but I don't know if they can really be like an A tier domestic NA squad if they're constantly playing change the fifth every week. Like, and you know, like their fifth hasn't like their fifth and even their fourth like don't do the same things that like they don't find players that fill the roles of the person that's outgoing. They just sort of grab someone who they think is skilled and bring them in. So it's like so it's not, I don't feel like there's a lot of like big brain like roster. Like I don't think like Recchi is sitting down and like looking at like the map of NA players and being like, oh, this person would be a perfect replacement for Whippy. Like let's bring him in. It's just like, hey, you want to play with Rebirth? He's like, sure, yeah. Like I want to go to a DreamHack Open. Like
yeah. I think it'll be fine. Like I think that Rebirth, it's not gonna like make or break them. You know, I don't think that move is like the worst. It's not the best. It's just a move that happened, and I think Rebirth is gonna play about the same overall.
Rebirth, the ever inconsistently consistent.
Yeah, because like it's like that group is so messy too. It's like you almost, I feel like these moves. I think the team that won out of all of these moves is honestly Secret Club because they just, with their firepower upgrades where they're at right now, I think out of those like three teams kind of fighting, 3 or 4 teams fighting for that 4th place playoff spot in Group B, I almost feel like they've got the best chance out of all of this given those changes. But again, that's something that we're going to have to wait and see over the next 2 weeks. So kind of moving into another big, I'd say a pretty big news story from this last week is we did get DAF stepping down from Counter-Strike off of Mythic. So ZNF is a stand-in for the rest of the season, as we are aware, considering roster lock right now. But
ZNF told Dusty.us he will finish the season, so that's like a done deal. And
yeah, so like how do we feel about, because like DAF was young and didn't have a lot of hours, and everybody's like, wow, this guy's cracked, so like
I legitimately have nothing. I hope you guys can fill in the gaps, because I was thinking about him leaving, and like he came into our lives and he left 28 days later. So it was literally like I don't think my brain had a time to form like an opinion of him. Almost like I didn't get to watch that many Mythic matches. I didn't hear anyone like saying like DAF is the future. Like he just came into our lives and he left. Like
I feel like that's characterized by Mythic struggles almost too, though. So
we're living in a we're living in a post Katie hellscape. Like
yeah, honestly,
there is no way out. Like the Mythic's glory days of Katie just blowing people's heads off is like over.
Yeah, honestly, it's ZNF is just like an experience upgrade. He's not going to make as many mistakes. He's going to have better synergy, honestly, with the team as it stands. So I'm not like too like it. Frankly, I think it is an upgrade.
Yeah.
But it's the upgrade that Mythic need. I'm not sure because he's not a KD.
It's a super conditional upgrade because we know he works full time and he's going to school, so it's not like he's going to be like. I mean, Mythic already don't have a you can assume Mythic already don't have a rigorous practice schedule, but I'm assuming ZNF, because he's been playing so much, he's just a plug and play player. Because they've been playing with him for so long, they probably just hop into the server and they see ZNF play your ZNF spots. So it's like,
yeah,
fine, Mythic. I mean, the fact that the funny stream team is contesting for a playoff spot is already like more than acceptable.
News. It's like it's almost kind of like it doesn't, it speaks to the group balance between A and B, because like if you watch like I casted Bad News Bears when they played Mythic, just I believe that was last week, and it was just a complete blow up. Like Bad News Bears are just on such a different tier, and considering they're only 2, it's rank 1 versus rank 3 in that group right now. Yeah, I don't know. Take from that what you will. So going into our next ones, we're going to probably try and speed things up here as we get closer to our 10-minute mark, because we do have some miscellaneous news to cover. We did see it was Melee and Use added to Oceanus. I think Use uses the one that I've got a little bit of experience watching. I think that's kind of a good move, but
It doesn't
like to hear
excite
your
me.
thoughts, you
Like
know?
I honestly saw that Oceanias were contesting for playoffs, and I was like, really? Like, okay, like Bear Fox, like you keep doing you, but like they're a team that like they're another. I almost feel like they're like a rebirth junior in the fact that like I can never really get excited for their roster because it's prone to implosion and constant changes. So it's like this on paper. I would say this on paper a lateral trade, but at the same time, like it doesn't get me excited for their continued efforts.
Let me pose a question. Do you think that this move will keep them in playoffs over team like over GGPR or maybe even like a moonshot from Rise or something?
No, not
I think
Rise.
it stands about the same chance as their former
Yeah,
roster.
I think GGPR will edge them out because I don't know, like Oceania.
You think momentum maybe? Momentum might keep him in the move.
Yeah, I
I
mean
think that's going to play out in a really interesting way, and I think
those
that's
like
like the one story in Group A
that's like
that's still
another
got
group
my
balancing where
attention.
like I can't tell you like so in Group B I can't tell you who's going to make playoffs because it's such an exciting action packed group. Whereas in Group A I can't tell you who's going to take the 2 final playoff spots because like I math and who doesn't like lose an embarrassing match like Eclipse or like SKDC. So it's like
Because we were talking about this pre-show, like there is there's like a complete in like a world where Eclipse makes playoffs in that group, and it's like it'd be the craziest timeline in the history of timelines, but it's possible. It is
well,
not mathematically.
don't forget they're playing with JJ Woohoo now, so
Oh yeah.
J period Woohoo J period the legend who has no name and has no face on HLTV.org.
All right.
And so final roster change, we have Ellison coming into Imperium. It's only up from here, fellas.
Yep.
Honestly, Ellison's a pretty solid like support element. So
Does it matter though?
Not really. I don't think so. But
you hate to say it because like they're a team that's always trying. Like the team's always going up, but it doesn't really matter ultimately.
They're trying.
They're
trying. They have my respect. They're giving it their all, and I
got a coach. I got an analyst. Every roster has been an upgrade. But god damn it, why aren't we winning? Like
it's only up from here.
It's only up from here.
We've got one more note. I think this one is from Jeff. Do you have this one? Secret Club.
We talked about Finn joining, and we said it was like we said it was a fair enough change.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I must have my brain missed that one. So we'll go into the miscellaneous news now. So we did have quite a few qualifiers over the course of this past week. Probably the biggest one being Extra Salt making it to DreamHack Masters in a pretty convincing fashion, not dropping any series, and they're going to DreamHack Masters, which is
they're going to Europe.
Over guess who? The team that replaced them. Woo! Because the Cloud9 lost. They're not going to DreamHack Masters. The irony is palpable.
The irony is palpable. But what is palpable also is how fucking good they are with Marky on the team.
Yeah.
Like this team, it looks like it's like night and day. Like Extra Salt were already doing really good with MOTM, but with Marquee, like they're just lights out. Like I love this. Like this team, if I wanted one team to escape like NA and go just see what they could do in Europe after 15 months of coronavirus, like this is the team that I want to like escape the gravitational pull of NA's borders. Like
Marquee is the reason I bought this sick bomber jacket. So I mean.
Funny Snake team, rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace, Funny Snake team. Yeah. So, anything else on that before we switch on? We've got a couple more to cover here. Nope. All right.
I think they're the only S tier team in NA right now.
And now they're consistent. So.
That is a good upgrade.
Watch the fuck out, everyone else. Like
exactly. I'm excited to see that happen. So,
go out in last place in Europe, get smashed by Spirit. Renegades, like
please no.
Yeah.
So we do have our next one was Modem playing with High Coast and some pretty good early impressions. So
yeah,
we feeling like this might be a permanent move.
It should be.
honestly, like the way that they were playing, like they like had like a new like energy to them, you know? Like it felt really refreshing to watch them play, and
They felt
you
less
know,
lost, you know?
yes, they felt less lost. They had like it felt like there was like a better understanding of like roles almost, which was interesting to see. So I really liked watching him play with
And
Modem.
if we talk about like the intangibles of this team, that New England Warriors high coast core had been together for a year and a half, if not more, at this time. And I think it was, if you just want to like talk about a team that's been like, top 40 but never really got higher, like that's like high coast to a T. So I think this change is good for them. And it's just something new. It's a new player for them to like learn from and to trade ideas with. And MOTM is, probably one of the most experienced free agents they could have got, because he's one of the only NA players with international experience that's been on a tier 1 org. So maybe not the player I would have thought about replacing. I always thought DJ was fair enough in his position, but then again, you couldn't really replace anyone else. So it's a good move, but unfortunately, the only person commiserations for DJ. I hope he lands somewhere and continues to do work, but
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine where.
I'm honestly just excited to see what that roster can do now, because they showed some flashes of brilliance, especially when they got the rematch against Bad News Bears in the qual, and they won. That's something that they're 2-2 in that series overall now, and they looked pretty convincing in this last one. So kind of going into some more interesting qualifier news, we've got something that was a little bit more controversial. And that would be the BLAST NA Open Quals. So the TO host in general that was partnered with for this was Challengermode. Now, if you've been on Twitter, you've seen quite a bit of flack that they've been receiving over this qual. Players just being invisible, weird sound bugs, and a couple other things. Now, I have worked with them in the past a little bit, so I think I might know a little bit of what might be going on here. These are my words, not Challengermode's. But besides like the anti-cheat stuff, I'll just put this out here right away. Like, these should probably be replayed. But
definitely, it's like
100%.
unacceptable.
If we've been here before, so for those who aren't aware, Challengermode used a server-side anti-cheat. Now, Faceit tried to do this in the past, and to my knowledge, that ended quite poorly. So basically, what at least this is my theory, is that they use a bunch of like what they call occlusion culling, and it's like for sound, smoke, whatever. And basically, it just makes players invisible if you shouldn't be able to see them. Now, you mix this with what's basically ping and
poor routing
from Dat host, their provider. You get players who are around corners who are still invisible because the server thinks that they shouldn't be seen. So it's
a mess. I don't think they're not ready for prime. They're not ready for prime time. I don't think for a blast fucking qualifier. Like they should be doing like these guys should be doing like CEVO level shit right now. Like, and their tweet longer like tells you they're not really ready for prime time either. Like, I don't think they understand the gravity of the situation, because they're just like, we're sorry we ruined the blast qualifier. Like, we'll fix it for next time. But man, you brought back the fucking crouch jump bug from PGL Krakow. Like, fuck off. Like, figure out your servers and then like come back. Like,
yeah, I think that the best course of action from here is honestly, you either change your server providers, your host, and then you abolish the server side anti-cheat and either put the money in to develop a client side anti-cheat and show that you're committed to this space, or you license one, which is also probably not going to happen. But
I mean, because like Twice is completely justified in saying like this is a load of bullshit that Recon 5 lost to the commission because in his opinion Maui Snake was abusing the jump bug. Like, that has no place in 2021 Counter-Strike. Like, this is just like a omni shambles. And so we have about a minute left in this show. So
all right, so it's time for speed burst time. We're going through the Premier matches, the cool ones. We're making this fast this time. So, Premier last week, we had some cool matches. High Coast 2-0 over Rebirth. We're just going to speed through them. Then we have Bad News Bears.
Tell us about the matches.
Yeah. Lay it on us. Bears 2-0 over Mythic. That was a blowout. Recon 5 2-0 over Secret Club. Strong showing from them. Rebirth 2-1 over Triumph. Kind of felt like a little bit of an outlier if you ask me. And then Bad News Bears 2-0 over GGPR. So
Which that was a fucking blowout as well, 16-0 and like 16-9 or something.
yeah, there was a 16-0 on Mirage. So we'll kind of go on to our matches to watch here. So first up, we've got Jeff.
I want to see Triumph versus RBG because Triumph are obviously coming off the Cynic high, and so you'd expect them to win, but RBG have just been consistent as hell, and so like this is a match between like strong fraggers under Sheikh Zula versus just RBG who are just rock solid, like less known players.
All right, Koi.
I want to see the Commission versus Recon 5, mostly because that's like a hard, throwback to the Blast Quals that just happened. A little bit of a grudge match.
All right. And then I want to see, of course, this is an easy one, Extra Salt versus Bad News Bears, simply because I think it's going to be a strong rematch from the DreamHack Masters Quals. So our match to miss this week, as we run into our 8 seconds, is Watch This versus Oceanus Gaming, because it's probably going to be a blowout and you probably don't want to watch it. So
And we're sorry, Watch This. It's not you. It's us.
It's us.
We
apologize.
This skit would be fun. This skit will be funny in season 37. We promise. You're
At
just
some point.
Just please pretend it's funny, and we'll get back to you on this. Like
All
when there's more than one bad team in season 37.
All right. So thank you everybody for watching this week's or listening this week's episode of the Max Round 30 podcast. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Look forward to the matches coming up, and we will see you next week.
Goodbye.
Peace.